Well, for those of you who have joined us today, basically in honor of Bonnie, we are currently studying through the book of Revelation, a book that for many is problematic and very hard to understand, but we're trying to grasp the message, a message of hope and confidence and the assurance that no matter what happens around us, if we remain faithful to Christ, we're secure in Him. And last week we took a close look at Satan's ally, his first ally, in the battle for our souls, what was identified or pictured as the beast from the sea. We saw how Satan can take what God has ordained as ministers of justice on earth, civil governments, and pervert them into beasts that seek to devour us. We saw how governments from the Rome of John's day to Hitler's Third Reich to our own constitutional republic have often set themselves up as gods, and how they have drawn the allegiance of believers away from the one true God to a false god of government. We concluded that any government that claims to be God, disregards the laws of God, or simply seeks to become a godlike substitute for its people is Satan's ally, the beast from the sea. His second ally, as revealed in Revelation 13, is the beast from the earth. And we want to focus our attention on this second beast this morning. But before we do so, I need to clear up a possible misunderstanding from last week. I said that when John spoke of perseverance and the faith of the saints, after speaking of going to captivity or being killed by the sword, he was telling us to not respond to attacks from the beast by rebelling against it or taking up the sword. That we should be prepared to endure whatever hardship the government brings upon us for our refusal to worship the beast. A question was later raised about Christians ever taking up the sword. And I essentially said it depends on who's fighting against whom. I'd like to briefly expand upon that this morning. Romans 13 makes it clear that governing authorities have been given the right to bear the sword as ministers of God and to bring wrath on those who practice evil. And Jesus told the disciples, shortly before going to the Mount of Olives, where he was arrested, that if they didn't have a sword, they should sell a robe and buy one. That seems to me to indicate there may be appropriate times to use weapons for defensive purposes. And since we are to render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, we may even be obligated to help a nation defend itself against an aggressor. However, as Peter soon found out in the Garden of Gethsemane, there's also a time not to use a sword. When God's purposes are being accomplished, even if we don't want to accept it, we keep our sword in its sheath. And if government becomes a beast and persecutes us for refusing to obey demands that violate God's revealed will, we're simply to endure the punishment meted out by the authorities. We defeat the beast from the sea not by fighting against it, but by not bowing the knee to it, by not allowing government to become our God. I think we can now move on to the beast from the earth, continuing in the 3rd chapter of Revelation. And I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, And he had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence. And he makes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. Whereas the first beast had come up out of the sea, the second beast came up out of the earth. And whereas the first beast was a horrendous monster with the body of a leopard, the feet of a bear, the mouth of a lion, having 7 heads and 10 horns, the second beast had only 2 horns and apparently looked like a lamb. But its looks were deceptive, for it spoke as a dragon or as a serpent. The word can be translated either way. It's generally translated as dragon in Revelation because of the descriptions that accompany the word, but it's been suggested that it should here be translated serpent because the Lamb spoke in a beguiling and deceptive way, as did the serpent in the garden. Either way, the Lamb wasn't what it at first seemed to be. It really wasn't a lamb at all, but a beast. John then makes clear that this second beast is an agent of the first, that it exercises all the authority of the first beast and, working in conjunction with it, tries to make those who dwell on the earth worship the first beast. That much John makes clear, but we're still left with questions. Most importantly, what would the original recipients of John's letter have thought when they read of a beast from the earth that made them worship the beast from the sea? If we're to understand this vision or any vision in Revelation, that's the first question we must ask ourselves. Last week we concluded the first beast would have been seen as the Roman Empire and Emperor Domitian in particular. If that's true, the second beast may have been an individual or agency that enforced emperor worship. And if the first beast, coming from the sea, pictured the Roman authorities crossing the Mediterranean to get to Asia Minor, the second beast, coming from the earth, may have pictured a beast arising from within Asia Minor itself. And there was an agency in Asia Minor that enforced the state religion, an agency that worked through a type of priesthood that presided over emperor worship in temples built throughout the land. This, I think, would fit the picture we see in the vision. And since the agency was administered by priests, it fits with statements in chapter 16 and 19 that will identify this second beast as a false prophet. I think there's little doubt that in John's day, the beast from the earth was the quasi-religious authorities that sought to impose emperor worship on the residents of Asia Minor. But what would this beast be today? Obviously, we don't have a priesthood dedicated to emperor worship. But do we have false priests, false prophets, who would lead us into the worship of false gods? Well, let's keep that question in the back of our mind as we go on to consider the method of the beast. And he performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which it was given him to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come to life. And there was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast might even speak and cause as many as do not worship the beast, but be killed. The beast from the earth, the false prophet, used great signs to convince men to worship the beast from the sea. He even mimicked Elijah's calling down fire from heaven to give credence to his false message. He was given power to perform amazing signs to persuade people to make images of the beast, a beast who had been killed but came back to life. That beast, as we saw last week, was Domitian, who many viewed as a reincarnation of the infamous Nero. The false prophets, the priests of emperor worship, apparently had supernatural powers. They performed miraculous signs and wonders in order to establish the emperor as a god. Now, does that surprise you? Does it shock you to hear that the allies of Satan can perform miracles? It shouldn't. In Mark 13:22, Jesus explicitly taught that false Christs and false prophets would arise who would show signs and wonders in order, if possible, to lead the elect astray. And in 2 Thessalonians 2:9, Paul made it clear that the man of lawlessness, the son of destruction, would come in accord with the activity of Satan, with all power and signs and false wonders and all the deception of wickedness. It shouldn't come as a surprise to learn that Satan's allies perform miracles, to make it appear that their message has the sanction of God. And that, by the way, is why the miraculous should never be the final confirmation of truth. Some people have been led astray from Christ because of a healing that was said to come from Christian Science, for example. Miracles can be used by spiritual powers to deceive, even miracles that do good and heal. Paul warned us in the 11th chapter of 2 Corinthians that Satan disguises himself as an angel of light, and that his servants disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. So it should be obvious that the beast of the earth can be used to deceive others with false wonders. Everything that he does, however, to confirm his message isn't necessarily supernatural. There are historical accounts of ventriloquism being used in pagan temples, and idols have been found that were designed to project the voice of a man hidden behind them. But whether the signs were supernatural in origin or simple acts of deception, they were intended to lead men and women into believing that false gods were true and must be worshiped. And if deception wasn't sufficient to bring about compliance, threats of violence and even death were included to ensure it. In the first century, the beast of the earth used signs, wonders, deception, and intimidation in an attempt to make Christians give up their faith. But is the beast from the earth still active today? Let's think about that as we go on to examine the mark of the beast. And he causes all, the small and the great, and the rich and the poor, and the freemen and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. And he provides that no one should be able to buy or to sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. The mark of the beast. What is it? And what does it signify? These questions have hovered around the mysterious 666 of Revelation for centuries. Let's see if we can't find acceptable answers to these questions in history and in the text itself. We begin with, what is the mark of the beast? Let's first think in terms of John's day. What would his original readers have identified as the mark of the beast? John indicated it was some kind of mark placed by the beast on the right hand or forehead of everyone, small and great, rich and poor, slave and free alike. And physical marks for identification purposes were common in John's day. Slaves were branded by their owners, and soldiers often branded themselves with the name of their commander. Other forms of identification were official documents and seals that indicated a person had complied with a regulation or had official sanction to do something. So it is possible that the mark of the beast was some kind of physical mark or document given to signify compliance with the demands of the beast of the earth. Historians tell us such a mark or document was given to individuals who obliged the state by burning a pinch of incense and declaring Caesar is Lord, and that the mark or document would give the bearer the right to make commercial transactions in Roman society. In view of their circumstances, the Christians in Asia Minor would have probably viewed the mark as such. But it's possible that the mark seen by John wasn't intended to signify a physical mark at all. In the 7th chapter, 144,000, which we identified as the church, were pictured as having their foreheads sealed with the mark of God. And in the 14th chapter, we were told 144,000 have the name of Christ and his Father written on their foreheads. Obviously, we don't have God's name visibly written on our foreheads. So the mark might be something else that identifies believers. The mark on the forehead might indicate that one's thoughts have been impressed. And the mark on the right hand might signify that one's actions testify as to his allegiance. The picture here could be simply indicating that just as God marks his own by changing their thoughts and actions, so Satan and his allies mark those who belong to him by affecting their thoughts and actions. And not being able to buy or sell may indicate that a man's spiritual values and religious commitments affect the way he's treated on the job and in the marketplace. So the mark of the beast doesn't have to be a physical mark, but it might. It may take physical form in some places, but we don't have to identify a physical mark as the mark of the beast in every society. Some have suggested that our social security number or the UPC codes on the products we buy are the mark of the beast, but that is ridiculous and really needs no response. The next question that plagues us regarding the mark of the beast is, what's the significance of the number 666? John speaks of the mark of the beast as the name of the beast or the number of his name. And verse 18 reads, "Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. Now, many have taken that verse as a challenge to decipher 666 into a man's name, thinking that if they could do so, they would be able to identify the beast. And all kinds of number equals letter systems have been devised to translate 666 into a name. The names thus deciphered are legion. They range from Nero to the Pope to Martin Luther to Hitler to Henry Kissinger to Saddam Hussein and many others. Such attempts are futile and unnecessary. Let's carefully read verse 18 again. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. John didn't ask his readers to calculate the meaning of the number, suggesting that if they had wisdom and understanding, they should be able to decipher it. He simply asked them to figure out a number that would represent the beast. As you already noted, numbers are often used as symbols in Revelation. 144,000, which is the sum of 12 times 12 multiplied by 1,000, stood for all of God's people, those from 12 tribes brought together with those in the church built by 12 apostles. All John was trying to do when he said calculate the number of the beast was to challenge his readers to come up with an appropriate number for the beast before he told them what it was. And he even gave a clue as to what it was when he said the number was that of a man or a human number. And this, by the way, also made it clear that while the beast was empowered by the dragon, it really wasn't supernatural. It was just a man or a council of men. So what's the number of a man? Since 7 is the number for God for perfection, what number would fall short of perfection and could thereby represent fallen man? How about the number 6? And we do know that the number 6 had a sinister connotation for the Jews. It signified that which approached perfection but failed, and thereby came to stand for anything evil. So if we wanted to come up with a number to stand for man-made religions or false ideologies that had as their goal the destruction of one's faith in God, what could be more appropriate than the emphatic 666? I'm convinced that's the significance of the number 666. It's merely a symbol used in Revelation to represent false religions, false prophets, false ideologies. In John's day, it represented the pagan priests who used signs, wonders, deception, and intimidation in an attempt to get everyone, including Christians, to worship Caesar. Today, any false religion, false prophet, or false ideology that seeks to draw us away from faith in the one true God would certainly qualify. And since the work of the beast on the earth is to get us to shift our allegiance from God to the beast from the sea, to a false god of human agencies and governments, any individual, institution, or even philosophy that would encourage us to trust in man and his institutions rather than God could be known as a beast from the earth. So is it possible to identify a particular false religion or ideology that might fill the role of the beast from the earth today? I think we can. It's the beast of humanism. The belief that humanity is capable of morality and self-fulfillment without belief in God. A worldview or life stance that points to the wonders and miracles of modern science and technology and says we no longer need a God to protect us, to provide for us, or to give meaning to our lives. This philosophy or ideology has infiltrated the arts and sciences, our legal and educational systems, the government, the business world, and the media in general. The beast from the earth can be readily seen in what used to be called secular humanism, but is now more commonly referred to as simply humanism today. And indeed, there is pressure on all sides for us to stop looking to God for answers, to look instead to man, to education, to technology, to government for the answers to all the dilemmas that face modern man. If we buy into that, we are worshiping the beast, and our minds carry the mark 666. I pray that's not the case with us, or with you. I trust that you still hold firmly to the conviction that it is in Christ that we find the answers to the questions of life. Now, that's not to say that he can't use higher education, technological advances, or governmental policies to affect change and provide for solutions to many of the problems we face. But it is to say that we must never allow education, technology, or government to be cut loose from the anchor of truth revealed in God's Son and in His Word. We must never allow these agencies of man the freedom to ignore what God has said, and we must never allow them to take the place of God in our lives. Our hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness, and nothing can ever be allowed to replace that as the basis of hope for the future. Is your hope solidly anchored to Jesus Christ? I pray that it is. And if it isn't, I give you the opportunity to make it so today by publicly confessing your faith in Him and asking Him to take the lead in your life. Come. If you want to make your hope secure, as did Bonnie. Come, let's stand.